Hi, so this is the third and final video for this week, session 1. This week is a little different because there are no labs or tutorials this week, but we'll start with those next week. And so on to the slides for this final video for this week and this session, session 1. These are some scholarly communities and aspects of scholarly communities and research norms that are important for the kind of work we want to do in this class and for social science in general. Universalism is the idea that we can agree upon ideas and practices and techniques that have scientific merit. Organized skepticism, this is basically where we feel free to challenge and question not every single aspect of what we're doing, but keep that open throughout the whole process. Being critical and skeptical, very important. Disinterestedness sounds kind of strange, like you just don't care or something, but that's not what's meant by that word. Basically, it means that you're open to new ideas and nonpartisan in terms of not having biases, or that you're being paid off by companies or research interest groups or something like that. Communalism is where we share our findings with others, and this is something we'll do in assignment 3 when we get there, way down the road, basically coming up with a research report that other people could read and benefit from. And communalism, a very important part of the scientific process. Honesty kind of goes without saying. We sure need a lot of that these days. It seems like, fake news and all these problems are kind of blowing up all around us. But here's a system that embraces honesty as one of its kind of core principles. And that's one of our core principles in this course as well. So we want to start moving towards developing a research focus in this class. This involves thinking about what problems are worth investigating, what is a good answer, how do we answer these kind of questions that we're trying to probe into, and then exploring different views and on effective approaches or ways we can do that kind of work. So these are steps that we'll be going through in this course. I love the research wheel. This outlines the steps in the process in a bit more detail, and this is what we'll be doing in this semester. We will be doing a lot of work at the beginning towards trying to get you to choose a topic, coming up with research questions, focusing your research questions. We will design a study to examine and conduct research in the area that you're interested in. It happens that in our course, the study that we're going to design is built around using survey methods, and that's how we roll in this course. We'll collect the data, meaning that you'll actually take the survey, and we'll use the data that all of you generate by taking it. We'll analyze the data in assignment 3 and interpret and inform others, and that's one turn through this wheel. And this is something we do every semester when we run this course. We take you through this wheel at least once, and for a second year course, it's just a really good and practical way to start. So a couple things from the textbook, just looking at the difference between quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative data using numbers, so numerical evidence. Your observations are explicit, so you lay things out very carefully about how you observe things, and you have a system for doing that. Quantitative data, some of the benefits, it's easier to compare and summarize data. You just have to think about some of the stats you are currently witnessing on COVID-19 to think about that. And so there's a lot of use for those kinds of numbers and that kind of data. And quantum data has the potential for statistical analysis. And we will only take you so far in that regard in this course. This is a Q course as well as a W course, but it's a Q course, and we will get to doing some very basic bivariate statistics and univariate statistics in this class. And so don't worry, we are not going to tackle a bunch of really hard stuff, especially in this summer semester 2020. Not going to happen. Qualitative data is empirical data. These are both forms of empirical data, and we covered that in the last video. Non-numerical evidence. So this is, like eyewitness testimony is an example. People talking about things, basically, or other forms. It doesn't have to be just talking about things. Interview is a very good example of a method that uses qualitative data. An interview, and we'll be touching on this in this class, is rich in information and capable of capturing complex social phenomena. And an interview, for example, could be very in-depth. So these are both very valid forms of empirical evidence. Quantitative data using numbers and processes for analyzing that and doing statistical analyses, and qualitative data, which is based on non-numerical evidence, whatever other forms that could be. It could actually be visual forms like pictures, images, things like that. Typically, though, qualitative data is words, basically, interviews, focus groups, that kind of thing. Here's just a table showing you a roundup of the different methods and classifying them as either quantitative or qualitative. So I won't go through and list all of these. I want to try and keep these videos fairly brief. But in the quantitative tradition, surveys stand out, and that is what we'll be doing in this course, and it's why we call it a Q course. And we'll get into things like subtle differences between surveys and questionnaires when we get there. But also experiments and content analyses and things like that fall into the quantitative tradition. In the qualitative, I mentioned interviews already, focus groups, which we'll talk about those at some point, field research, and don't worry, we're not covering all these things. Again, in this class, we are going to basically acknowledge the existence of all these different methods and do a bit of a overview of that, but we really are going to focus on developing a survey in this course. So here's some big ideas from the textbook: ideographic explanations and nomothetic explanations. An ideographic explanation is something that is typically, although it doesn't have to be, but typically is used in the qualitative tradition. So an accounting that includes the multiple causes of a specific event. So check out the textbook. Again, you can just do a little search, ideographic, in your ebook if that's what you're using, and I assume that most of you are, and read up more about that. Nomothetic is typically where you're trying to develop overarching kind of rules or laws or principles to explain things, and you're identifying a few common causes of a broad category of events. So these are just different approaches. So a really important part of chapter 1, and something we want to kind of put a bit of emphasis on, is the concept of variables. This is crucial for doing work in the social sciences and in science in general. And you'll see in the textbook very easy and straightforward definition of a variable, which is properties of objects that can change. They vary. We're looking at independent variables and dependent variables. And independent variables are ones that produce changes in dependent variables. So here we're using an example of education. Dependent variables are ones that are changed due to independent variables. That's a little circular. Let's look at this example though: income, longevity, success. Yes, this sounds great. So if we look at the idea of level of education influences income or success, then the level of education is the independent variable, right? It has an effect on other things like future earnings potential. And the dependent variable is that income or success, or other ways that you can think of that a level of education might affect. So variables have more than one value or attribute, and that's how they vary. And this is a very important part of understanding what a variable is. So let's look at this example: religious affiliation as a variable. You could measure that. You could ask people a question on a survey, for example, and say, what is your religious affiliation? And possible attributes, and there's different ways you could do this. And many of you probably are looking at this going, what? Why would you categorize it in that way? There's other ways to categorize it, and that's fine, that's good. We want to encourage that kind of thinking. For example, we have Protestant and Catholic. You might think, well, why not just say Christian, for example? But in this example, we have Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, Zoroastrian, Hindu, Sikh, none, or other. And of course, we're missing Jediism here, very important. So yeah, lots of different ways to set up the attributes. And you just need to be clear about this whenever you're setting up the attributes for a variable and have a good rationale for why you're doing that. Variables are different than constants, obviously. Constants just stay the same. So we don't want to get too much into that, but it's really important to think about variables, and especially in this course when we're asking questions on a survey, every question becomes a variable. In general, we are looking to work towards developing theories, and theories are very important. And from the textbook, a definition: a theory is a set of interrelated propositions used for understanding observed realities. So as we pointed out in the previous video, we're looking for patterns in social action, and that's what we're doing research in. Theories are trying to provide explanations for those patterns, and they are trying to come up with deeper, fundamental why kinds of questions. And so we can think of all kinds of theories, and I've seen lots of great ones developing in this class over the years around the use of social media and things like that. And yeah, that's what we'll be moving towards in this course. So hypothesis is another concept that's very important for us, especially in assignment 3, where we will be coming up with a hypothesis related to the data that we get from the survey. If we think about, here's an example of propositions, a proposition between interrelated concepts. And here we have immigrant groups and their integration and factors that are affecting that. So we have a concept which is integration, and then we have another concept which is employment. And you can start to put numbers, not numbers, but pluses or minuses on things, right? And so here's a proposition: as immigrant groups' integration into Canada is enhanced, their chances of finding employment increase. So, okay. Here's another one. This is another kind of hypothesis, which is basically a statement that makes a prediction in a way, but it relates concepts in a meaningful way. And here we have another one: as social inequality in society decreases, levels of the public's happiness increase, right? So these are just examples, and we will carefully take you through the steps of developing these in this course. And this is an idea that is introduced in this chapter, but we'll follow up with it next week. The difference between deductive and inductive processes. So a deductive one starts with a general idea or a theory, and then the research that you do tests that idea by collecting data. And deductive and inductive work in kind of different directions. Inductive, you start with a case study and basically check out what's happening within the bounds of that case. And then you try to figure out or extrapolate a general rule that you can move towards developing a theory or a hypothesis. So these work together. Here's a wheel. We like wheels in this course. This is the wheel of science. Wow, pretty heavy stuff. And you can see that you're just continuously flowing through processes of induction and deduction, coming up with theories, testing them, and then coming up with more theories, developing hypotheses, making observations, and so on and so on. And so just introducing this idea. Next week, we'll pick up on it in a lot more detail in the chapter, in chapter 2. So now let's think about the participation outcome for this video, which will be a basic writing exercise. So if you go to assignments in Canvas, by the way, if you click on one of these show by date, it'll organize things in a certain way, chronologically, as opposed to show by type, which I prefer, because then it kind of organizes things nicely. And in lecture participation outcomes, we have session 1 writing practice. So click on that. And basically what we want to do here is a low stakes kind of attempt at getting your writing going. We want to do quite a bit of writing in this course, and a lot of it, it's important that it's what I call low stakes exercise or low stakes writing exercises, because these get you moving in a direction, and it's meant to support your work towards higher stakes exercises in the forms of the assignments. So just take a stab at this. Don't worry, we're just getting rolling right now. Do the best you can. Follow the instructions in here, and try and loosen up a bit when you're writing. And don't worry about the style. It's okay. Whatever you splash down, I'm fine with, as long as, again, and we'll talk about this lots, as long as what you're saying is respectful and in keeping with the ethics and etiquette of you being a student in a university at Simon Fraser, and how we behave and think about things. And so we have, again, zero tolerance for racism or sexism or anything really that's hurtful towards other people or groups of people. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Other than that, kind of try to have fun with it. Just write out ideas and don't worry about it too much. Again, we're just practicing so that when you get to do the actual assignments, you'll be ready to go. Okay, give it a shot.